So I have shared my PPT. Is it my screen is visible to everyone?
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Okay, thank you. So the last lecture, what we discussed about the branch prediction mechanism. There are exist many branch prediction mechanism because we do not have a time to discuss all many of them. So you've discussed few of the branch prediction mechanism. Next, we'll look at the how to overcome the data hazard by means of a dynamic scheduling. Now, what we have discussed is static scheduling in a in a pipeline that is statically scheduled. What you do in a pipeline that is statically scheduled, we fetch a instruction and we issue a instructions unless there is a dependency between the instruction that is fetched and the instruction which is already there in the pipeline, and that dependency cannot be overcome by means of forwarding or by means of a forwarding or bypassing. Now, so the fetch instructions, you check with the if there exists a dependence and with the already instruction already in the pipeline, and if dependency exists, then if the pipeline is the stall. The instructions where that uses the result is stall, and as a result of which the all the instructions no instruction is issued into the pipeline. So this is what you do in a statically scheduled pipeline. uh, in a statically scheduled pipeline also, we try to separate the instructions, the dependent instructions, such that the dependency the stall due to the dependency can be the minimized. So in a static scheduling, if there is a hazard, if there is a hazard, then the hazard detection hardware detects the hazard and stop issuing the instructions, stop issuing the instruction and the one that follows. So moment the hazard detection logic detects that the instruction which is fetched and it cannot be issued into the pipeline, that means moment you say it is issued, that means the instruction goes into the execution stage. So that is how you differentiate with the issue. The when the instruction issue, then the instructions begins its execution. Now, so when a hazard is detected, then it stop issuing that instruction for which there exists a hazard and the subsequent instructions in the pipeline. So no instruction is fetched or issued until the hazard is clear or the dependency is the clear. That is what is done in a static scheduling pipeline. Now, in case of a dynamic scheduling, uh, they look at, in case of static scheduling also you rearrange the instructions. Now in a dynamic scheduling also you rearrange the instructions, and this rearrange of the instruction is now done by the hardware. In a statical scheduling also the instructions are rearranged, which is done by the compiler. So if the compiler try to separate the dependent instructions such that the hazard can be the minimized or hazard can be eliminated, or at least it can be the minimized. The in dynamic scheduling also the instruction, but the rearrangement of instruction is done by the hardware. So hardware rearranges the execution of instructions to reduce stalls while maintaining the data flow and exception behavior. Now look at, there are two properties which are critical to the correctness of the program, is the data flow and sorry and the exception behavior. And any rearrangement that is done either by the compiler, statically by the compiler, or dynamically by the hardware, the you need to maintain the data flow and exception behavior, and these are the two critical property which ensures the for the correctness of the program. Then both are doing the same thing. If you look at statically scheduling also rearranging the instruction, the dynamic scheduling also rearranging the instruction, then what advantages the dynamic scheduling does have over the static scheduling? Now let's look at some of the advantages. Now it allows the code compiled for one pipeline to run another pipeline machine. Now, what is it that if it is done by the compiler, and if your microarchitecture changes, look at the compiler generates a code for the microarchitecture on which the instruction is going to execute, that we have seen in one of the lecture. So it's the the whatever the code that generates by the compiler, that the code is going to generate on the microarchitecture. Now, if your microarchitecture changes, then the code generated by the compiler for one microarchitecture may not run in another microarchitecture. So this is another problem. So you need to have, in that case, you need to have a multiple binaries, or the code need to be recompiled in another microarchitecture. The microarchitecture change, then you need to recompile the code for the microarchitecture, or you need to have a different binaries for a different microarchitecture. But if you are using a dynamic scheduling, then the the code compiled for one pipeline machine can run in another pipeline machine. The second advantage is it handles the cases when dependency are unknown at the compile time. Look at during the compile time, if there exists a dependency and that dependency involves the memory, then the compiler cannot handle such a dependency. But in the case of an hardware scheduling, it enables the handles the cases when dependencies are unknown at the compile time. The Another importance that of the dynamic scheduling is it allows the processor to tolerate unpredictable delays such as cache miss. Now, suppose a cache miss occurs. Now, if a cache miss occurs, then then you then you need to call the operating system to handle the cache miss. Now, during this process, then a number of cycle is lost. Now, to handle the cache miss. Now, in a dynamically scheduled processor, you do not know what will be the delay in a cache miss. We do not know the delay is unpredictable in a cache miss, and how many clock cycle is going to take in a cache miss. It misses in a cache. It may be there in the next level of the cache, or it may not be there in the next level, and it may finally go to the main memory. It depends upon the number of level of the cache, and and the and it's the present, or if the hit in the cache, or it's the miss in the cache. So the delay is the unpredictable delay. So allow the processor to tolerate then how does it allow the processor to tolerate an unpredictable delay? So it allows the processor to execute some other instructions when there is a cache miss. So the unpredictable delay is due to cache miss can be tolerated by the processor. Now, let's look at the all these advantages that we have in dynamic scheduling, and these advantages are again at the cost of a significant increase in the hardware. The complexity of the hardware is increases significantly to gain these particular advantages. Now, look at in a dynamically scheduled processor, it cannot change the data flow. Look at the two things that need to be maintained. One is the data flow. The other one is the exception behavior. So the dynamically scheduled processor cannot change the data flow. What it does, it tries to avoid the stalling when the dependencies are present. So if dependencies are preserved, if the dependencies between the instructions are present, then it's tried to overcome it tries to overcome the stall due to the dependency. And how does the statically scheduled processor does? The statically scheduled processor, it tries to separate the dependence instruction such that such that there won't exist any stall. But in a dynamically scheduled processor, is the processor is not going to separate the instruction, but is find out a mechanism to prevent the stall due to the presence of presence of dependence. Now it tries to avoid stalling when dependency that could generate an hazard. So in a dynamically scheduled processor, if there is exists a dependence and that dependence that can generate an hazard, then it's tries to avoid the stall due to the hazard. Now this is what I said. The statically schedule static pipeline scheduling by the compiler is tries to minimize the stall by separating the dependent instructions so that they is not going to lead into an hazard. Now let's look at some the major the pipeline limitations. Now if you look at the pipeline that we have discussed, or the until that we have discussed, the instructions are issued in order and the instructions are executed in order. So we call it the in order issue and in order execution. In order issue of instruction, and because the instructions are also issued in order, the executions are also done in the in order. So the pipeline that we have discussed is basically a in order issue, in order instruction issue, and in order instruction execution. Now the instructions are issued. So in a in order issue, the instructions are issued in the program order, and if an instruction is stalled in the pipeline, then no other instruction can be the process. So since you are issuing the instruction in order, if a instruction is stalled because of there is a dependency, and that dependency cannot be overcome by means of data forwarding or bypassing. So you cannot hide the latency between the instruction that produces the result and the instruction that is going to use the result. The latency cannot be hidden now. So if you cannot hide the latency by means of forwarding or the bypassing, then you have to stall that instruction. Then once that instruction is stalled, then no other instructions it can be issued into the pipeline. So this is one of the limitation of the pipeline that we are discussing. Now if your pipeline has a multifunctional unit, so this is what we have discussed in one of the lecture, that we have in the floating point pipeline we have a multiple functional unit, and if one instruction is stalled, then, then all the instruction in the pipeline is stalled and the functional units remain idle. So in case of a multifunctional unit, the units remain idle because instructions are no longer issued to this functional unit. Now if a instruction J is dependent on a long running instruction I currently in execution in the pipeline, then all instruction after J must be stalled until I is finished and J execute. So this is what the it says. Suppose I had a instruction I, there is a instruction I, and this is a very long running instruction, and there is an instruction J. Now this is a long running instructions executing in the pipeline is take a some more number of clock cycle, maybe maybe like a divide or multiply instruction, and the instruction J is dependent on the result of the instruction I. Now in such a case, the instruction J is stalled because it's going to use the result of the instruction I, and the result is not available, so instruction J is stalled. Since the instruction J is stalled, and all instruction after instruction J is also stalled in the pipeline. This is what happened in the pipeline that we are discussing. Now let's take this example. Let's take an example this. Now in this sequence of instructions, now let's look at the dependence that exists between the sequence of instruction. Let's look at the add instruction. The add instruction is data dependent on the divide instruction. So let's look at the add instructions need F0, and divide instruction is going to write to the F0. So there exists a data dependence. So there is a flow of data from the divide instructions to the add instruction, and the data flow has to be preserved. Now So there is now let's look at, so there is a dependency between add and the divide. Now let's look at the subtract instruction. The subtract instruction is not dependent on any of the previous two instructions, is neither dependent on the subdivide instruction nor it is dependent on the add instruction. But the subtract instruction cannot be issued into the pipeline because the add instruction install. Yes, the add instruction install because it depending on the result of a very long running instruction divide. So the add instruction is stall and the subtract instruction is also stall. So this is what happens in the pipeline that we have discussed. Now look at the subtract instruction is not stall. So the subtract instruction is not dependent on any of these previously issued instruction into the pipeline. Then instead of stalling the subtract instructions, you can issue the subtract instruction for execution. So it's no way dependent. This instruction is no way dependent. So issue the subtract instruction for execution. Now uh, we looked at one of the limitation of the pipeline that we have discussed is the in order issue and in order execution. That in order issue of instructions and the instructions are also executed in order. Now the instructions are no more in order issued, or and the instructions are once you issue the instructions, subtract instructions, then the instructions are not issued in order now. So when the instructions are not issued in order, then the execution of the instruction will no more be in order. So the instructions will now be out of order execution, and an out of order execution which result into an out of order completion. So there can be some complication in the pipeline. So let's look at what will be the complications in the pipeline. Now, when you issue this instruction in the pipeline, then both structural hazard and data hazard could be checked during the instruction. Now before you issue the instruction into the pipeline, so look, add instruction is data dependent on the divide instruction, so you can because there is a data dependency, you can stall it. But subtract instruction is not data dependent on any instruction in pipeline, so a data dependence does not prevent a subtract instruction from executing. But what it prevents only, because we said that the instructions should be issued in order, instructions should be executed in order, and instructions should be completed in order. Because of our in order issue, in order execution, and in order completion, that is because of that we cannot issue the subtract instruction. Now let's execute the subtract instruction. So when you issue the subtract instructions, then you need to check for subtract instruction can be issued only when no hazard exists. There is no structural hazard exists and the no data hazard exists. So if there is a data hazard exists, so the data dependency is to preserve, and if there is a structural hazard exists, then the resources are not available, so the instruction cannot be issued into the cannot be issued for execution. So uh, check both the structural hazard and data hazard during the instruction decode stage. So during the instruction decode stage, you check for two hazards, structural hazard and data hazard. Now you check for the structural hazard and wait. Now when you issue when you issue this instruction, now you check for the structural hazard. You check for the structural hazard, and if the structural hazard does not exist, then wait for the absence of the data hazard. If the data hazard is present, then the instruction will be issued in order, because the dependency has to be preserved. So what we are doing now, to issue a instructions, first we are checking for a structural hazard, and if a structural hazard do not exist, then wait until the absence of a data hazard. If the data hazard do not take place, if there is no data hazard exists, then you can issue the instruction into the pipeline. So in the key idea in the dynamic scheduling is they allow the instruction behind a stall to the proceed. Now, if you look at this in this case, this instruction is stall. The add instruction is stall. In a dynamic scheduling, allow the instruction behind a stall instruction to proceed. When you will allow the stall instruction to proceed, provided there is no structural hazard exists. If I am to execute the subtract instruction, so first I will check for structural hazard. If the structural hazard do not exist, then you check whether there exists a data hazard. If data hazard also do not exist, then you simply execute this instruction. Now, so with doing this, we are enabling the out of order executions. That means the instructions are issued. Then once the instruction issued, then the instruction will be executed out of order, the out of order executions, and the out of order the completion. When the instruction will be issued out of order, the instruction will be executed out of order, and out of order will result into an out of order the completion. When there will be out of order execution and out of order completion, then there will be some there we introduce certain different types of hazard in the pipeline. The out of order execution. So what the dynamic scheduling does? Dynamic scheduling facilitates for a out of order execution. The out of order execution introduce the possibility of a two different hazard, write up to read and write up to write hazard, and these two hazard do not exist in the 5-stage pipeline that we have discussed, and the logical extension to the floating in pipeline, it does not exist in the 5-stage pipeline. The in order integer pipeline or the in order floating point pipeline, because the instructions are executed in order and instructions are completed in order. So the write up to read and write up to write hazard is not going to take place. The write up to read and write up to write hazard will take place only when you allow the pipeline to execute out of order, and it completes also in the out of order. That means it writes into the corresponding register. Then these two hazard will arise. Now let's take this instruction and let's analyze what are the dependency exist between this instruction. Now, if you look at between the divide instruction and add instructions, there exists a data dependence. Between add needs F0, divide plus F0, there exists a data dependence. Now, if you look at between there any other, this is F10. So let's look at between add instruction and the multiply instruction. So between these two instructions, both of them there is a output dependence. There exists a output dependence between the add instruction and the multiply instruction. Both are writing into the same register. Now between the subtract instruction and multiply instruction, there exists a data dependence. Now if you look at between add instruction and subtract instructions, there is anti-dependence. So in this code, there exists two data dependence, one between the divide and add, the other between the subtract and multiply instruction. There exists output dependence between the add and the multiplied instructions, and there exists a anti-dependence between the add and the subtract instruction. So look at the data dependence has to be preserved. The data dependence has to be preserved, and this is to preserve by means of the data flow. So you have to preserve the data dependence, the dependent instruction has to be executed in order. Now, if we'll execute this instruction out of order. So look, so let me rename this instruction as 1. This is instruction 1, instruction 2, instruction 3, instruction 4. Now, the instruction 2 is dependent on instruction 1. So you cannot execute the instruction 2 before instruction 1. So the execution order has to be preserved. So 2 will be executed only after the instruction 1 executes. So this is to maintain. Now let's look at the subtract instruction. The subtract instruction is not dependent on instruction 1 or instruction 2. Now you execute this instruction out of order. So it's they assume that there are enough resources are available. So we issue the instruction, execute the instruction. Now when these instructions write to the register F8, it write to the register F8, which is going to be read by the add instruction. Now as a result of this, the out of order execution between instruction 2 and 3, this gives rise to an hazard called write up to read. Anti-dependence result into a the write up to read hazard. Now let's look at multiplier instruction. So subtract instruction completes. Now the subtract, so the multiplier instruction is depending on the subtract instructions. Now let's say instruction 4 completes its execution. Now let's say divide instruction is a very long running instructions. Still it is executing. The multiplier instructions is executed out of order. So when the multiplier instruction executes out of order, they write into F6, and there is a dependency between multiplier instruction and add instruction on the same register, floating point register F6. So this gives rise to a write after write hazard. So so if we'll execute these instructions out of order, then it gives rise to two new hazards, write after read and write after write hazard. So the dynamic scheduling avoid this hazard. Now look at these two hazards exist only because they are using the same register. So by renaming this register, if you rename this register, then the write up to write and write up to read hazards can be eliminated. And dynamic scheduling does this by means of renaming the register. So both can be avoided by use of register rename. So you change the register name, that it can be done by means both the hazards can be eliminated. Now the another problem of dynamic out of order execution and out of order completion. Now look at as a result of the out of order completion, it may give rise to a new form of hazard, and those hazards can be eliminated by a register renaming. That is what we discussed. Now then the out of order completions also creates one major complication in the pipeline in handling the exception. Look at data flow and exception behavior. You have to maintain the data flow and exception behavior for correctness of the program. So this is another complication that arises in handling the exception. Now if the data flow is maintained and exception behavior is also maintained, then the correctness of the program will maintain you're going to maintain the correctness of the program. So you need to find out a mechanism for handling the data flow and find a mechanism for handling the exceptions. So now you looked at the mechanism for handling the data flow that we have discussed. Now let's look at the how does the exceptions are handled. Now how does it preserve the exception? Now dynamic scheduling with out of order completion exception behavior in the sense that exactly those exceptions that would arise if the program were executed in strict program order actually do arise. So what he says that you execute the instructions in the program order. Suppose this is the sequential execution of instruction in the program order. As a result of the sequential execution of program order, some exceptions will arise. And when you execute these instructions in out of order and resulting in the out of order completion, then this out of order completion will also generate exactly those exceptions which will be generated in the sequential execution of the instruction and no other exception. Now the dynamic scheduling has to ensure this one, that only those exceptions will arise when you execute this when you execute the instruction in the strict program order, and the order in which the exception is going to arise should also be maintained. And and the dynamic scheduling also generate it also generate the exception exactly in the same order in which the sequential execution of exception is going to generate. So if this is done, then you can preserve the exception. Now, exception is preserving by ensuring that no instruction can generate an exception until the processor knows that the instruction raising the exception will be executed. So what he says that a instruction is not going to generate an exception until the processor knows that the instruction is going to raise an exception will actually be executed. If that instruction will actually executed, then the processor, the instruction can generate the exception. Now the dynamic scheduling may generate a imprecise exception. Now let's look at what is an imprecise exception. Now an exception is imprecise if the processor state when exception raised does not look exactly as if the instructions were executed sequentially in a strict program order. So what is it? The dynamically scheduled processor may generate an imprecise exception. When you say the imprecise exceptions, I will execute again. Let's execute the sequence of instructions in a program order, and let's say there is the instruction I. Then this instruction I generate an exception when it executes when this execute in a program order. Now when it generate an exception, there is some state in the machine. So machine will be in some state. Some machine will be in some state. Now when the dynamically scheduled processor generate an exceptions, now the instruction I, if it generate an exception, if the state of the machine is not same as the state of the machine when this exception is generated in the strict program order, then we say the exception is imprecise. When we want the exception should be a very precise exception. So the state of the machine in a when the instructions are strictly executed in a program order and when the instructions are out of order, both of the states should same or should remain the same when that exception is generated. And an imprecise exception can occur uh, the two possibilities. The first, the pipeline may have already completed instructions that are later in the program order than the instruction causing the exception. So let's say there is the instruction I and there is the instruction J, and this look at, we are executing the instruction out of order. So this is in the program order and instruction J is completed. So instruction J is completed and instruction J is completed in execution and instruction I is not completed. And because this instruction is not completed, then it may generate an exception at any stage in the execution. So this is what he says, that a pipeline may have already completed instructions that are later in the program order. Instruction J is later in the program order and which is already completed. Then the instruction I which is causing the exception. The second is just the opposite. The pipeline may not yet have completed some instructions that are earlier in the program order than the instruction causing the exception. So what he says, this is instruction I, this is instruction J, this is the program order, and he says that the instruction I has not completed its execution, but this instruction J is causing the exception. The instruction J is causing the exception, but some instructions earlier in the pipeline has not completed this it's not completed its executions, and we know that the exceptions we strictly handle in the program order. So these are the two reasons for which the imprecise exceptions may occur in the pipeline. And the imprecise exceptions makes it difficult to restart the execution after the exception. So suppose a instruction I, let's say this instruction I and J, this is instruction I and J, then instruction J is already completed its execution, and instruction I has generated an exception. And we know that if an exception is generated, then you start executing the instructions starting from the instruction that causes an exception. So starting from instruction I, but instruction J is already executed. So imprecise exception makes it difficult to restart the execution after the exception. Now, uh, now the to allow the 5-stage pipeline uh, to support a out of order execution, the instruction decode stage of the 5-stage pipeline is split into two stages. One stage is called the issue stage. What is done in a issue stage? That you decode the instruction and you check for a structural hazard. So uh, uh, the instruction decode stage you split into now two stages. In the one is the issue stage where you decode the instruction, then you check for a structural hazard, and if the structural hazard do not exist, then you go to the next stage, and our next stage is the read operand stage. Now in the read operand stage, you wait until no data hazard exists, then you read the operand. If there is no data hazard, then you read the operand. So let's look at what happened in the issue state. So you fetch instructions, then it goes to the next stage, the issue stage. Now in this stage you decode the instruction and you check for a structural hazard. If no structural hazard exists, then you actually issue the instruction, and when it issues, you wait in for the goes to the read operand stage. In a read operand stage, you wait until the operand is available. The moment the operand is available, then you go for execution. So this is how a modification is done in the instruction decode stage to execute the out of order. Now look at in the issue stage, the instructions are issued in order. So in a dynamic scheduling, so let's look at uh, what happens up to the instruction phase stage to the execution stage. The instruction say phase stage precedes the issue stage. So it says that there is a instruction fetch, and there is one more stage issued here is issue, and there is another stage is called read operand. So the instruction phase stage precedes the issue stage. Instructions are either fetched into the register or into a queue of pending instructions. So you fetch the instructions and put it in some register or put the instruction in a queue. So we'll assume that all instructions are put in a queue, and the instructions are issued from the register or from the queue. Now, when the instructions are issued, you fetch the instructions. The instructions which is ahead of the queue, then you look at whether any structural hazard exists. Now, if no, you decode the instruction and check for structural hazard. Look at in a 5-stage pipeline. In the instruction decode stage 2, you are doing multiple operations. You are decoding the instruction and reading the operand. So here we are not reading the operand in the instruction decode stage. Rather, the reading the operand is moved to one more stage. It's called the read operand stage. So the instructions, if no structural hazard exists, the instructions are issued from the register or from the queue to the read operand stage, And in the read operand stage, it wait for an operand. If the operands are available, it reads the operand and it instruction goes to the execution stage. And the execution stage follows the read operand stage. So it is issued, fetch, issue, read operand, then execution stage. So from the instruction will be issued. Once the instruction is issued, it goes to the read operand stage. So in the read operand stage, it wait until the operands are available. Once the operand are available, the instruction goes to the execution stage. And this execution may take say multiple number of the clock cycle. Now we'll now distinguish between two terms here. One is called begin execution and another is called the complete execution. We'll distinguish between when an instruction begin execution and when an instructions completes its execution. Between these two times, the instruction in is in execution. That means when the instructions begins with the executions and when the instructions complete in the execution, between these two time we'll say the instruction is in execution. That means the instruction yes, if the instruction is taking a multiple clock cycles, then we'll say the instruction is in execution. Now then there will be multiple instruction will be in execution. So let's look at, we had a number of functional units. The instructions moment the operands are available to the functional units, then each functional unit can begins with execution. So there will be multiple instruction will be in the execution. And this requires we need to have a multiple. So now to take advantage of this dynamic scheduling, then you need to have a multiple instructions in execution, and this requires you need to have a multiple functional units, or you pipeline the functional unit, or you need to have a multiple functional units, or you also pipeline the functional unit. Now in a dynamically scheduled pipeline, so let's look at what how the instructions are executed in a dynamically scheduled pipeline. In a dynamically scheduled pipeline, all instructions pass through the issue stage in order. Look at, it was instruction fetch, then there is a issue, then read operand. Let's say let me put it RO, then execution. Now in this, all instructions pass through the issue stage in order, where the instructions are issued in orders. First, you check for a structural hazard. If a structural hazard exists, then the instruction install, and when an instruction install, then all subsequent instructions are installed. So the instructions are issued in order. So it is in order issue. The problem with the pipeline that we discussed, it was in order issue, in order execution, and in order completion. Now let's look at in a dynamically scheduled processor, the instructions are issued in order. Now, but this instruction can be bypassed, can be stalled or bypassed each other in the second stage, in the read operand stage, and thus entering the execution out of order. So what is it? You have issued the instructions in order. So in the read operand stage, there will be multiple instructions in the read operand stage. If there is no structural hazard exists, suppose you get instruction 1, no structural hazard exists. This is in the read operand stage. Instructions 2, no structural hazard exists, sent to the read operand stage. Then instruction 3, sent to the read operand stage. So there are multiple instructions in the read operand stage, and in this stage, all these instructions are waiting for the operand. And if a let's say instruction 1 is waiting for an operand which is still not available, and instructions 2 is waiting for an operand which is available. The moment the operand is available to the instruction 2, then it can start executing the instruction. Similarly, when the operand available for instruction 3, it start executing the instruction. So the instructions are bypassed or they are stalled. Suppose if the instruction 1 and instructions 2 are dependent. Suppose the instruction 1 and instruction 2 are dependent, then instruction 2 is stalled. So if the instruction 2 is dependent on any of the instruction which is currently in execution, then the instruction 2 is also stalled because the data flow is to be maintained. So in the second stage, the read operand stage, you can bypass the execution of the instruction. Thus, the instructions are enter the execution out of order. Now, when there will be the execution out of order, then it will result into out of order completion. So, in a dynamically scheduled processor, the instructions are issued in order, they are executed out of order, and they are completed out of order. So, in order issue, out of order execution, and out of order the completion. Now, there are two techniques which are available for this for dynamic scheduling of the processor. One is the called the scoreboarding. The other one is the Tomasello algorithm. We'll discuss only one of the technique. And in case of a score the scoreboarding, it assume that the sufficient resources available and no data dependency exists. The other technique is called the Tomasello algorithm. In case of a Tomasello, it tracks when the operands are available to minimize the row hazard, and introduce the register renaming to minimize the write up to write. Sorry, there has to be a not write up. This is one of them has to be write up to read. One is write up to read. The other one is write up to write hazard. Now, look at in a dynamic scheduling, the write up the because by register renaming you have to eliminate the write up to write and write up to read hazard, and it minimizes the impact of the stall due to the row hazard or due to the data hazard. Now we'll discuss only one of the technique called the that is proposed by the Tomasello. And now this this technique was invented by the Robert Tomasello, and for the IBM series of the processor. This was done to allow the execution to proceed in the presence of dependency, was used in the IBM 36091 floating point unit. So basically it was designed to improve the performance of the IBM 360 series of the processor, and there was certain problem with the IBM 360 series of processor, and they want to improve this performance on this. So let's look at, we'll discuss what was the limitation of IBM 360. Now it was invented by Robert Tomasello. Now this it tracks the approach or the proposed by the Tomasello. The tracks when the operand for instructions are available to minimize the row hazard, and introduce the register renaming to minimize the write up to write and write up to read hazard. Now IBM 360 was there before the case was they introduced. Now the goal of the was IBM to achieve the high floating point performance from a instruction set and from the compilers designed for the entire 360 computer family, rather than from a specialized compilers for high-end processor. So what he says, IBM has a different series of processor, and they had a compiler for a different series of processor. Now the IBM thought that instead of having a compiler for a different series of the processor, why not to have a compiler for all the 300 IBM 360 series of processors. There is a single compiler for all the IBM 360, and to improve the performance of the to improve the floating point performance of this instruction set. Now this was some limitation of the IBM 360 series. The IBM 36091 architecture has only 4 double precision floating point register. So there is only 4 double precision floating point register, which prevented the interesting compiler scheduling operation. Now look at the scheduling can be done by the compiler, scheduling can be done by the hardware. Now when you do a compiler scheduling, the number of active register required increases. Now but if you look at the IBM 360 has only 4 double precision floating point register. With 4 double precision floating point register, then finding the effectiveness of compiler scheduling is great was limited because of limited number of the register available, floating point register available. Now this led to Tomasello to find out how to get more effective register using a mechanism by register renaming in the hardware. So there are only 4 register, as a result of which uh, the the exploiting more the compiler scheduling uh, was difficult. So the Tomasello find out how to get a more effective register by renaming in the hardware. Now the other problem with the IBM 360, it was a long memory access and long floating point delay. So look at, if you have the number of registers are less, then when you need a operand, the operand has to get from the memory location. So that way, if the access is more, then the processor has to wait for a long period of time, and there are long floating point the delays. uh, but this IBM 360 system was a they were somewhere designed around 1966. It was a it was a very old processor. Then why do you need this algorithm was proposed by IBM? Sorry, proposed by Tomasello for to overcome the problems with the IBM 360 series of machine, and those machines were existing in 1966. Let's look at around roughly 60 years back. So why need to study such a old technique? Now the if you look at all the dependence machine, the dependent of this all these machines, whether it's a the Pentium, or it's a Power PC, or it's a Alpha 21264, all of them uses a some variations of the Tomasello algorithm. So what does the Tomasello algorithm do? Is try to exploit the dynamic scheduling, is try to minimize the overcome the write after write and write after read hazard, so that the code can be rescheduled, and this is done dynamically. It does the register renaming by using some hardware mechanism. Though the number of register available are less, but using the Tomasello algorithm, the effective register can be increased by using some hardware mechanism. So the next class will discuss about the details on the Tomasello algorithm, and how does the how does register renaming is done in the Tomasello algorithm, and the how out of order execution is completed, and it does not read and it also does not generates the write after write and write after read hazard, and I will see how the data flow and exception behavior is also maintained in this dynamic scheduling. So it's almost time. So you can leave the uh, you can leave the team and join in the next class.
Hello,